So if you've spent any time at all on the internet, you probably know that people on Twitter love to give their opinion, even if absolutely no one asks for it. I mean, personally, I just tweet photos of my ass and some occasional motivational quotes, but there are really people on here that will argue for hours about John Marston's hair. So I figured I'd use this constant argumentative nature of the app to my own advantage. So the other day, I tweeted out a reply or quote to this tweet with your biggest gaming hot takes and controversial opinions. And of course, just to add a little bit of spice, I added a gif of The Last of Us Part 2. Am I copying Anthony Fantano? Yes. Yes, I am. But I don't care, because Anthony Fantano is a melon. Before we start, can you just like the video? It just helped me out. It would really help me out. I would really appreciate it. Just like the video. Also, if you want to be involved in these in the future, make sure to follow my Twitter, link in the description. Let's just jump into it. Turn-based combat systems are outdated. They aren't engaging and shouldn't have made it out the 90s. The only reason we had turn-based is because games weren't advanced enough for real combat. Now that we're way past that, any game with turn-based combat is instantly outdated to me. Well, this is a shit take. So turn-based combat, yes, it was created in, the early stages of gaming because companies couldn't necessarily create more in-depth, more advanced combat systems. But just because something was made in the past doesn't mean it's automatically outdated. Over the years, like any gameplay system, developers have evolved to turn-based combat. It is certainly not the exact same as it was in the 90s. And if you think that, you just need to play more turn-based combat games. On top of that, this whole talk of a real combat, as in real-time combat, is a bit silly to me. If every single game had the exact same form of combat, then they would all become the same homogenized mess. In fact, James says it better, so let me just steal his tweet. To homogenize all gameplay systems is to take away the identity of games. Turn-based systems have their place and can be uniquely fun, as can real-time, as can strategy, as can RTS. The fact of the matter is, nearly every single gameplay system will have its place and its audience. And when you look at games with turn-based combat, they're still as popular as ever. Just look at XCOM, Persona 5, the Pokemon series. I mean, Dragon Quest XI sold 6 million copies, which is roughly the same as Ghost of Tsushima, and sure, Ghost has been out 2 years less than Dragon Quest XI, but it still shows that these games can be just as popular as mainstream AAA games. And I've tried not to mention Pokemon too much, but I mean, it is still one of the most popular gaming series in the entire world. Pokemon Sun and Moon sold like 17 million. So there's clearly an audience and clearly still developers out there that care about making turn-based combat systems great, evolving them, and keeping them relevant despite the absolute explosion of real-time combat in the past 10 years. But that's just a theory. A game theory. Next one up comes from Jacers, who says having engaging, interesting traversal mechanics should be an extremely high priority when making a video game. It's almost as if I used this exact tweet to make my last video. So if you've not seen that, go check that out right now. Card up there, or there, I never remember which side of the screen it's on. But as always, Jacers has the best takes. I mean, it's literally with everything. I don't know how he does it, but he has the best takes about every single gaming topic. It's mental. Next up, we have Mario5380, who says, The Rise of Skywalker is a great Star Wars movie and is hated way too much. Well, first of all, Mario, the tweet said gaming hot takes. And second of all, The Rise of Skywalker sucks donkey dick. So you're just an idiot on two fronts. And that's fine. You can be stupid, but, just don't expose yourself for it. Next up, we have Sam Appleness, who hates everything, so I'm sure this will be good. 90% of games have mid to bad stories. Video games generally aren't the greatest medium to tell an amazing story, and the medium as a whole has a lot of work to do if it wants to catch up to books, movies, and TV in terms of storytelling. You know what? I would agree with this. Although I think that there's plenty of games out there that have stories that rival the best films, the best TV shows, and the best novels, they are very rare. I mean, movies with great stories are a dime a dozen. Novels with great stories are a dime a dozen. But finding a game with a truly astounding story that blows you away, it is kind of tough. That being said, I do think the ceiling for game stories is way higher than the likes of films, TVs, and novels. Because films, shows, and books are far more restricted both in their length and in their storytelling style, they can never truly create the immersion and care that a story such as, say, Red Dead 2 creates. There's no other medium where you can spend 35 to 100 hours being a character, living the story that's being told. So yes, although I think there's way fewer games that have as great stories as films, TV shows, and books, I do think that that the ceiling is way higher for games that do. So I'd argue that the best game stories, although being rarer, are usually 99% of the time better than anything you can find in at least films and TV shows. I mean, novels are a little bit different, but you get what I'm saying. In other words, Red Dead Redemption 2 has the best story ever told in the entirety of fiction. That's basically what I'm trying to say. Speaking of Red Dead 2 and Rockstar in general, Nils says Rockstar games play weird. Everything feels slow, heavy, and even clunky at times. And I could spend like 5 minutes debunking this, but Aidan Robertson, a fellow YouTuber and Scotsman, did it better than I ever could in less than 240 characters. Slow and realistic movement is a valid form of gameplay as long as it fits into the tone of the game and is justified by it. Not every game should be high action, fast paced gameplay, which is spot on. I think a big problem in the gaming community is that people will latch on to certain niches or certain styles of games and then assume that every other game should replicate that. I think that's one of the reasons that after The Witcher 3 we got a barrage of open world RPGs. I think that's the reason that after GTA 4 and 5 we got a barrage of modern day open world shooters. And I think that's the reason that every single video game box art these days is exactly the same. It seems that companies and sometimes consumers want to homogenize the games industry. They want to take what's most popular or what they like the most and just plaster it across everything. But if we did that, then every single game would be the same repetitive, bland, open world action RPG, which is a direction that we've already been going in for the past 5 years. AAA games are at their best when they stand out, when they innovate, and when they do something new. Batman Arkham Asylum, Red Dead Redemption 2, GTA 3 Vice City and San Andreas, Uncharted 2, Cuphead. Recently someone made a point to me in a DM and it stuck with me really hard. The modern gaming industry is made up of 4 games. You've got generic racing game, generic first-person shooter, generic RPG, and generic sports game. And if we keep trying to homogenize the medium, then that problem's just going to get worse and worse over time. So what I'm saying is, encourage publishers to do something different, to step out the box. Support publishers and developers that innovate and do something unique. Anyway, that was a slightly longer tangent than I expected to go on. Let's move on. There's too many fantasy games nowadays. I'm sorry, but I just don't find fighting dragons, wizards, or whatever enjoyable. Give me an open world modern day action game any day. I mean, yeah, this kind of goes back to our last point. There has been a fuck ton of fantasy games since The Witcher 3 dropped. Every single open world game it feels these days has the same barren mountain ranges and generic jungle / forest terrains. Like, for real, just make a unique world. Please. I'm not the biggest fan of fantasy either, so I thought I should just throw that in. Keyboard and mouse for first-person shooters are super immersion breaking and it feels like ass. Controller is king. I'm just gonna move on. Red Dead 1's story is better than Red Dead 2's. You know what? Now, hear me out. I think Red Dead 2's story is, like I said earlier, the best narrative in all of fiction. Well, at least it's my favourite narrative in all of fiction. That being said, you can definitely make an argument that Red Dead 1's is better in certain ways. It is more compact, it is more concise. Better written is maybe the wrong word. It's far more interestingly written because there's far less time to tell the story, so a lot more of it is condensed into these larger monologues from the characters, you know? John as a character in Red Dead 1 is written in a very different way to Arthur in Red Dead 2, despite the two having similar stories and there being parallels between each of their journeys. You rarely hear Arthur go on some giant monologue critiquing civilization and the American dream. The two games are definitely written very differently, and Red Dead 1's a far more personal story to John. It's more about his journey and the things he encounters along the way, whereas Red Dead 2, I feel, focuses far more on the surrounding characters. It focuses on how the gang functions together. It focuses on the relationships between Arthur, between John, between Dutch, between Micah. And that's largely because Red Dead 2 is a far bigger game, so there's far more time to explore these relationships. Whereas Red Dead 1, it's far more condensed, so a lot of the things, not necessarily rushed, but just written in a different way that makes the pacing faster and more concise. So yeah, it's a fair argument. I disagree, but Red Dead 1's story is definitely up there. Also, sorry for this big fat spot on my face. I mean, it is made up for by my fantastic haircut and my general hotness, but like, still, sorry about that. Holy shit, I've been recording for way longer than I expected. You know what? I think it's time for a little bit of a speed round because we have plenty to get through. Black Flag's gameplay except ship combat is shite. Agree, I made a video on it, go watch it. I think COD is a shit franchise. Agree, it's repetitive, boring, and is being run into the ground. Bully is Rockstar's only masterpiece. You're contrarian. shut the fuck up. From Software games have outdated gameplay. I disagree, they have a very unique style of gameplay, and although it's not personally my cup of tea, I understand why people enjoy it. Ocarina of Time is one of the most overrated games in my opinion. It has probably changed the gaming scene when it's released, but it has aged terribly and is simply not fun to play at all. While you can argue that yes, it has aged bad, the impact it had on the gaming industry is far more important. You kind of got to put your mind into the mindset of people at the time to understand why it was so beloved and why it's so great, and why it's remembered as one of the most influential and important games of all time. God of War 2018 and The Witcher 3 are great, but that's it. I mean, I'd agree, they're great. That's it. First-person games suck, especially when it's story-focused games like Cyberpunk. Like, what's the point of customization in a first-person game if I'm not even going to look at my character? I get what you're saying about the customization thing, but like, first-person games most certainly do not suck. It's just wrong. Skyrim is insanely overrated in its entirety other than its music, lore, and DLC. I mean, the base game of Skyrim is definitely not as good as people hype it up to be, but adding the DLC and adding mods, it's a masterpiece. Like Ocarina of Time, it also had a massive impact on the gaming industry that has never really been replicated since. And there's a couple more about Japanese RPGs, but I have never played a Japanese RPG other than Pokemon, so I'm just gonna leave them alone. And with that, wait, what? What do you mean? Last of Us Nah, people don't have controversial opinions about The Last of Us 2. What are you talking about? No, that can't be right. The Last of Us 2 is objectively not a great game. It's so polarizing that the ones who love it seem to forget the plot holes and inconsistencies throughout the story, also the pure stupidity of decisions and terrible side characters. Those who love it are forcing themselves to love it. All you did there was criticize its story, and its story direction, and its character writing. You did not at all criticize it as a game. You said it was objectively not a great game, but all you did was say that you do not like the story direction. This is going to be a theme, by the way. The Last of Us 2 has a great story, and it was unjustly hated by three sorts of people. Joel stands that could not accept that an important character can die, childish players who don't get dark and mature stories, reactionaries who got mad about Buff Abby and Gay Ellie. Well, I think calling people who don't like a story's direction childish is childish in itself. Yes, there are certainly people who didn't like The Last of Us 2 because of those reasons, but there's plenty of other people who have fairly valid criticisms of the way the story went. And I think putting everyone who disliked the game into those three camps is just massive oversimplification. The Last of Us 2 was a masterpiece, and the majority of people who don't like it can't understand its nuance. Once again, oversimplifying someone's opinions by just saying that they don't understand it is not a good way to look at game criticism. Yes, there are probably plenty of immature people who don't understand the nuanced storytelling of that game, but there's plenty of others who simply did not enjoy the direction the story went in. And that is fine. I mean, The Last of Us 2's story is told in a very unique way, and I'm sure a lot of people just simply didn't enjoy that direction. Just calling them small-brained imbeciles who don't understand nuanced storytelling just makes you look like a pretentious dick. On the other hand, The Last of Us 2 is a perfect game, and I wouldn't change a single detail in it from the gameplay, world design, story, or character. That's absolutely fine. Whilst I disagree, that is absolutely fine. The Last of Us 2 is the greatest game of all time. Again, would massively disagree, but that's what you think. See, this is the way to appreciate a game without tearing down everyone who dislikes it as idiots. Anyone who doesn't like The Last of Us Part 2 does not understand storytelling. Fuck's sake! There's so many! There's so many! If you think anyone who doesn't like The Last of Us Part 2 either doesn't understand storytelling, is an idiot, or is a sexist, then you are just as bad as the idiots and the sexists that hate relentlessly on the game because Abby has big muscles, or other dumb reasons like that. The game is divisive. The game was always going to be divisive because there was no way to pay off what happened in the original game without pissing off at least a few people. But attacking the personal character of those who either like or dislike the game solely for that reason just makes you look like a dick. Simple as. And with that, we're going to end on a take that I largely, not entirely, but largely agree with. At this point, it's not a hot take to say it's either game of the year or that it's the worst game ever made. About 50% of people feel each of these ways. My hot take is that it's neither incredible or awful. Well said, 69 Guacamole. Well said. And there we have it. That is the first of many, hopefully many, gaming hot takes videos. Once again, just inspired by Anthony Fantano. I'm truly inspired by the melon head. I really am. If you enjoyed the video, it would really help me out if you could hit like, and also if you're new here and want to see more content like this along with plenty more, make sure to subscribe and turn post notifications on so you don't miss any more videos like it. If you want to support the channel, Patreon link is in the description. Every little bit helps. And if you want to be a part of these videos, make sure to follow my Twitter and my Instagram, links in the description below. With all that being said, I've been Joe, aka Founder Scarab, and I will see you in the next one.